Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next episode of Vinyl Stallions!
What up, everybody? It is Spruce. Welcome to another incredible episode of Vinyl Stallions, which is a podcast about all things music, and you can check us out anywhere at Vinyl Stallions. We have another incredible guest today. We have Mr. Dave Friedman, who is the audio engineer in charge at The Star, which is a 91-acre campus of the Dallas Cowboys world headquarters and practice facility in Frisco, Texas. Dave has also ran live sound for Jerry's World in his past role and has also been an audio engineer on a handful of bands tours, including Genesis. He dives into an incredible world that is not very much highlighted, so get ready for that. But before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to the Soiree of the Stallions, which is a music charity event that we will be putting on in about 2 weeks up here in Cleveland at Beachland Ballroom and Tavern. Go check us our socials out. Go check it out anywhere. Soiree of the Stallions. You can donate, buy tickets there, and see the incredible lineup that we have. But besides that, enjoy this episode. Uncle Dave, welcome to Vinyl Stallions. How we doing today?
All right, doing great, JJ. Adam, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. It's great to finally meet you and hear what you got to say.
And Uncle Dave has so much to say about amazing stuff in music, amazing stuff in just sound and audio in general. And yeah, this is a long time coming. We're happy to have you.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, so where do you start these kind of conversations? Where do you like to pick up?
Well, we usually, for reference, Dave, you are the audio engineer, correct, of the Dallas Cowboys and AT&T Field in itself. And dive in a little bit more detail into your current role and kind of what you do for the Dallas Cowboys.
Sure, you bet. So, the title, it's kind of a little hokey in the setting that I'm in. It's taken from the title's taken from the broadcast world. So the guy that I work with, he's the main engineer over at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. And so Dwayne, he comes from a broadcast background, and so adopted that nomenclature for the titles. And so I was working as an audio engineer, mixing some broadcast soccer games and football and such over at the Stadium Galley about a decade ago. And at the time, I was a contractor working for either the Cowboys or other third parties like NEP or these broadcast trucks that go in there and do broadcasts of the sports games. And so the guy who was mixing front of house at AT&T Stadium was a guy named Sims. And Sims, old hippie, great, man, just a fantastic audio engineer. One of those guys you knew he was an old school audio guy, big ponytail and, super cool, very nice. And he did that for, I think about 30 years. He mixed front of house for the Cowboys, and he was retiring. So Dwayne then asked me if I'd like to come on board, him and another guy, Gary French, who's the A1 over there at the stadium, the main audio guy. And so I would work with Gary, and I would mix out in the bowl what there's 100,000 people that can fit in that venue. So at the time, it's probably the largest indoor venue you could mix in. Now I think there's some larger soccer stadiums over in Europe that are a little larger indoor venues. So anyhow, kind of a long way to get to the title of the role. But so when I started there, then, of course, I was an audio engineer working, mixing the games. And then Dwayne mentioned, hey, we're going to build a new facility up in Frisco, Texas. And I need an engineer in charge is the term that was taken from it's the old broadcast truck. So if you we're working in that domain on these mobile trucks, like how you see the NBC truck or ESPN truck on Monday Night Football, let's say. And if you were on maybe another truck and you needed to get a feed from a certain truck, you'd walk up and you'd say, hey, who's the engineer in charge, or who's the EIC? And the EIC is just a common acronym that everybody knows. That there's go ask the EIC on the truck, he'll know. And so anyhow, so that's how I have my title now. So it looks a little goofy in emails, though, like engineer in charge. Like, who the hell does that guy think he is? It's kind of the typical reaction. Who's this bozo, thinks he's in charge? Of course, it's an old broadcast term. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of funny in the what ends up being kind of the corporate world with email footers and all that. It almost doesn't make sense. It's funny. So my official title is engineer in charge. So there you go. So anyhow, so with that, really what that means, though, is probably more important is that and this guy Dwayne, who hired me to do this role, he's fantastic at this role. Where over at the stadium, he's in charge. It's all you can think of it as the technical plumbing. So, it's all the infrastructure, just like on the trucks, it's the truck and, all the plumbing on the truck to bring together all the audio and video production. Obviously, in a large facility, it takes on a whole new meaning because there's so much more of it in these facilities. So Dwayne is an engineer in charge, of course, at the AT&T Stadium, and then I'm a engineer in charge specifically for audio up at what they call the Star in Frisco, Texas. And that's a little bit like Disneyland. It's a 90-acre campus, and there's a mid-sized stadium, seats about 12,000, kind of a college size type stadium. And then there's where the Cowboys practice, and they have a couple outdoor fields, and then there's headquarters facilities, and then there's a broadcast studio and also radio studios and podcast studios, and they all talk to each other, and we send a closed circuit television network out around the 90 acres as well. So there's restaurants, and there's a hotel, and a hospital, and in all of these facilities, you can watch what we're doing over at the Cowboys portion of the facility. So things like live press conferences and things of that nature, you can see them go down live, whether you're out on the street on the plaza and there's a big board outside, or if you're eating in a restaurant and that kind of thing. So it's all the plumbing and technical architecture that ties all that together across the 90 acres is where I spend most of my time these days.
So what you're mixing, is that what would be broadcast out on TV, or is that what would play out of the PA at the actual stadium?
Yeah, so back in the day, when I was mixing at AT&T Stadium, that is what you would hear going through the PA system, sitting in the bowl. So they call it a screen show production is kind of the generic term if you go to any of these stadiums or arenas. And it's, it's all everything you see and hear that gets produced, the experience that an attendee would have. As soon as, you get out of your car, you're hearing audio coming off of a pole in the speaker, and as you approach the facility, out on the plazas, and then you get in there and, there's all sorts, everything from the anthems to little bands that play and commercials, of course, that pay for it all. And so, yeah, there's a queue. If you look at a run of show on a game day, if you look at that, there's a queue about every, I'd say 5 to 20 seconds. There's that's written out and scripted, and each of those have a number that gets called. And so for a good 4 hours, about every 5 to 30 seconds time frame, you're taking a cue and flipping a switch or hitting a playback or whatever it is. And of course, the only time that you're not in the live environment is when the team's over the ball. When they're over the ball, you don't do anything. It has to be quiet. Of course, the fans are going nuts, but when they're not over the ball, there's always something going on. And so that I did that for about a little over 4 years. And then what I do now, when I shifted up to the Star in Frisco, that is, I'm not mixing front of house like that. What I'm doing is it's more of an engineering role where I'm doing the infrastructure that supports a lot of that. So, we do lots of football and soccer and lacrosse and other events, a lot of corporate events with bands and that kind of thing. In the Ford Center is what they call the stadium itself. And there are parts of that I do mix if it's a little more complex or, something more involved. But by and large, I have teams of audio people that I'll staff into roles to do the mixing. But I spend a lot of time doing design and configuration and, the infrastructure piece. And then as a kind of a smaller portion of the overall role, of course, we have a studio that's going, almost 24 hours a day, where they're pumping out talk shows. And when we do live broadcasts on game days, on rare occasions, if it's very complex and we're doing a lot of remote stuff, I'll end up mixing some of those. But by and large, I'm doing just the engineering piece. And we'll have operators come in and mix the shows for the most part. But that is broadcast over TV. That's the pregame shows and the halftime shows and the postgame shows is what a good portion of those are that you'd see on a game day. And then, of course, there's, radio stuff. I don't, other than the engineering piece, we have some fantastic producers that mix the radio and podcast stuff themselves. But if they have a problem, they give me a call, of course, and I'll come over and, do the programming or fix things so they get their feeds, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Has been on that side of the sound in sports for so long, has that changed at all your viewing or listening or watching of sports? Are you very noticeable now of kind of everything that's happening, or has that changed at all?
Yeah, I'd say in some ways, yeah, it's, knowing how they make the sausage, and then you're sitting there kind of eating it, right? So it kind of changes, the way you think of it. Certainly, it's hard to watch, honestly, whether it's music or sports, and not pick it apart technically. It's hard to just sit back and relax and enjoy it sometimes, because you'll always be like, oh, geez, that, the sync is off by, a half second, or there's something, technically that might be a little weird, you're like, golly, it's something that's very obvious. Why is the commercial so much louder than the show, stuff like that. But you can really pick it apart. I still love, watching sports, but I'll tell you, when you do hear it done right, particularly now that guys are mixing in surround sound, when they get it right, and you're sitting in your living room, and I have a small surround setup. I'm not an audiophile at home, but I do have a small B&W system. And man, when guys mix live sports and surround and they do it well, holy smokes, it's a whole nother experience, watching it and taking it in. And of course, when they do it wrong, that's where I think, to your point, it's kind of hard to watch. And I get distracted because maybe the way it sounds, isn't maybe ideal. Something's goofy with the surround mix or the up convert or whatever it is. And I get to thinking about that instead of just enjoying the game.
Yeah, like you said, that sausage analogy just hit it right home for me. So how does then, when you mix audio for our listeners, because we're obviously more like music focused, like how does that compare? Do you have audio down? Does that translate over perfectly to like sound engineering and anything along those lines, or what's the difference?
So
I guess
it is a good question in that, so I come obviously from a music background. I used to tour mixing music for mostly like rock bands and that kind of stuff. But in comparison to what people mix, whether it's corporate type audio for like conferences or whatever, or sports, or music, each of them, certainly the principles are the same, understanding dynamics, and compression and equalization and amplitude and signal flow, all of those basics are needed across the different domains, whether it's sports or entertainment, or music, and what changes is the workflow, certainly, some of the tools, so in, one of the most like recent, I call it recent, but as in, the last decade or two, like over in the corporate space, there's an old hippie guy named Dan Dugan, who's a fantastic designer. And he came up with this device called the Dugan Auto Mixer, and it's in the corporate space, it saves the day, right? So this thing, what it does is it auto mixes, like say you had a panel discussion of 10 people, what this thing does is it, takes in the mics and it turns up the guy who's talking and turns off the other 9 people, but it does it within a milliseconds. And so the end result is you only have the equivalent output of a single mic at any one time. So that sounds simple, but it's not. It's what he's doing when people aren't talking. If you can see these things dancing, like all 10 channels, but during that whole time, as they're waiting for someone to talk, the output's never more than one mic, right? And so in the corporate space, that's like a tool that is a de facto standard now. They use it everywhere, on the presidential debates to your local mom and pop, panel discussion. Now, in the music world, they'd never use that, just because in music, you're always mixing, 30 to 50, sometimes 70 channels of inputs for a concert or a show, right? So there's really no need for that type of tool. So some of the tools are different, certainly. The workflows are different. In the sports world in particular, where you do a lot of more integration work between trucks and facilities that bring together the venue with the truck. Now they do that certainly, you know, for entertainment shows as well. But where it gets a little different, I think, in the sports area is the facilities piece of it. You end up with different and greater distribution out to, you know, like everything to parking lots and, you know, restrooms and suites, and it more so than you would say for like the country or, you know, Academy of Country Music show. You know, the Super Bowl is a much larger type production, let's say. So anyhow, so the basics are the same, you know, the basic knowledge in terms of the audio domain, but the workflow and some of the tools are certainly different that you'd use in each of these areas.
And something you just glossed over was that you have experience in both the music and the audio. And I really want you to dive into this because the story of how you got into the music world is just fascinating to me. And hell, Paul Nichols, who helped produce and mix my single Underwater under Spruce, which actually Club drummed on as well. Uncle Dave put me in contact with him, and he regarded you as one of the best drummers he has ever seen in his life. And he swears that you could have just made it as a drummer just all the way through. And honestly, every time I go over there, he talks about it. But yeah, take us back into like
funny
how you got into music and then how you actually started mixing sound for bands.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah, it definitely has a lot of Cleveland in the story for sure.
We love Cleveland on this show.
Guards.
Yeah, I guess.
Guards.
I guess going back in time, you know, of course, you know, like most people, you know, there's always the family influence first, right? So somebody's parents, you know, in this case, it was my mom, you know, that was into music probably more than anybody in the family, right? And so that started it. And my brother Sam, older brother Sam, he goes by Sammy Free if you're out and around Cleveland watching bands or out having fun seeing shows. So Sam started to play in a band, and one of his first bands was a band called Exit, X-IT, X-IT. And it was, you know, typical garage band, played high school, that whole thing. And I was the drum roadie for Scott Bakos. He was a local Fairview Park guy. And and then he, you know, when he wasn't there, I'd play drums at practice, right? And then eventually, or Gordon Bakos, I'm sorry, Scott was his younger brother that I went to school with, but Gordon Bakos, the older brother, was the drummer, and so I became his backup, and then would play when he wasn't there. So I'd play with Sam and Paul Banco and Rick Kuharek and eventually Mike Dosey, who's just a fantastic local Cleveland musician and engineer, and was kind of my audio engineer mentor for, golly, almost, you know, more than a decade, certainly. And still is, you know, on occasion we still talk. But so I was playing with them. I was the young punk kid, right? And they were way senior to me by a couple of years. And we played, you know, the Corral and the Agora and all the local venues at the time. You know, this is late 70s, early 80s kind of time frame. And so I got into playing music that way and played in a bunch of different bands, played in a band called Bastille with another great Cleveland musician, a guy named Billy Sullivan. And man, if you have not had a chance to talk to Billy Sullivan, you should. He's a fantastic guitarist, played with everybody and their brother in Cleveland. And anyhow, so we played in this high school band called Bastille, and we had a bunch of these little, you know, there were 10 or more of these little bands that we'd play. And eventually I got a call to play with Paul Nichols, one of his colleagues, a guy named Terry Hartman. Terry played in a band called the Back Doormen in Cleveland. This is back in the day of Para Ubu, and it was kind of punk, come of age, mashed up with pop, and these guys, Terry in particular, him and a guy named Dan Cook Dan's he's in Portland. He's a great writer. Terry, fantastic writer. These guys are on par with, Nick Lowe and Bob Dylan and, the Allen Ginsberg type dead poet characters. These guys were just fantastic writers. And they had this edgy poppy music that they were playing. And I got a call to play drums for Terry. So as it turns out, Dan and Terry and Paul and these guys had a hookup down on West 6th Street, just above the Flats. And so and for those that may not be familiar, Cleveland has an area called the Flats, and in the Flats, it's next to the old Cuyahoga River, the old river that burned. And there's a string of clubs down there, Peabody's and Fagans and all sorts of these little live music clubs. And just up the hill was West 6th Street. And so these guys had an old warehouse. When I say old, it was old and beat up and broken windows. And it was a pretty janky part of town. You didn't want to be around there late at night, certainly. It had it all, the bums, there's a gay club, a spa, the janky corner bar. We were up on the 4th floor. And so this old building was our rehearsal space. And in the rehearsal space were groups like the Back Doormen and Terry and the Tornadoes and a couple other handful of bands, Rapid Transit. And so there's a community of musicians up in this old warehouse. And so I started to play drums. A guy who was in the band, Mike Dosey, he played guitar. Terry Hartman, Kevin Kerr on guitar. Terry played bass, and Mike was really the audio engineer guy. He's real sharp. So he started recording what we were playing. It was all original music, no cover music. Everything was original. And so we started recording on 4 tracks and bouncing it across to 4 tracks to, get multiple layering and overdubs, reel-to-reel stuff, right? And so as we started to record ourselves, we started to build a small studio. And then we started to record the other bands up in the loft. So we started to record, the Back Doormen and Rapid Transit and, in addition to ourselves. And what would naturally happen was, some of these bands would say, hey, you recorded our stuff. We're going to go play out next weekend. Would you want to mix our live show? And so if we weren't playing out, I'd say, oh, of course. Yeah, I'd love to. So then I'd go mix their live show. So that was kind of how we started doing live mixing. And then eventually I found that, hey, that paid pretty good. And I could do more of it, because original music, you're not playing every weekend. A good month would be, 3 or 4, shows, let's say. So I think I was working, over at Fairview Hospital and, washing dishes and, had a pretty shitty job in high school doing this stuff. And so I thought, boy, this is a lot better work, a lot, more interesting. Sure is fun. I love music, so we started to mix the bands that we were recording, which were just buddies, part of this little community of musicians. And then once we started doing that, it just started to grow from there, and started to mix more and more live bands around Cleveland. Mad Money was one of them. There were so many great local original music bands at the time. I don't know if it's like that so much anymore, but man, during the 80s, late 70s and 80s, Cleveland had exploded with music from original bands. The creativity in the writing of all types, everything from reggae to punk to rock, jazz, man, it was just coming out of Cleveland like crazy. Yeah. And, the Exotic Birds, which we did a small tour in the Northeast. I remember it was the Exotic Birds. They were the warm-up band for Culture Club.
Okay.
Which was up like in Pittsburgh and I think Cleveland. We did a couple shows. And a funny aside from that is when we came back, they brought on Trent Reznor, who started playing with them. So we did a couple shows. This was all pre 9 Inch Nails stuff, right? Yeah. So here's Trent Reznor. For everyone at the time, they were doing, it was almost like a Duran Duran looking gag with, goofy 80s hair and the whole bit. And Trent would play sax and, nonsense like that. And it was fun. It was really great music, actually. Good industrial, like dance music stuff. Mm-hmm. And anyhow, so music of all kinds coming out of Cleveland. And so it was, great territory for an audio engineer to cut their teeth and learn how to mix and, learn how not to mix, I remember there was a string of shows at Peabody's Down Under. I got a gig then eventually at Hood Industries. It was the name of the company. So they were a local audio company, and they would design and build speakers and install them in venues. The guy Jack Bosnick and Rodney Price and Bob Smith, all these guys, Tom Buckley, old Buck, these guys were great audio guys and had all these relationships with the old Cleveland Agora and Peabody's Down Under. So they'd build cabinets and they'd put them in there, and then they'd be the front of house or system engineers at the clubs. And so I was doing that. So I got a gig with them, out of high school at Hood Industries. And it was mostly mixing. So I was like the front of house guy at Peabody's and eventually over at the Agora. And did that for a number of years. But one of the things about that in terms of education that's fun is because it was such a wide variety of music, when Wynton Marsalis came through and did a week of shows at Peabody's Down Under, that was really exciting, certainly, because most of it was rock and reggae and pop or dance, type music. So to have jazz, straight ahead hardcore jazz was very different, right? Mm-hmm. And what I learned there was, get the hell out of the way. Don't add reverb, don't sweeten it up. Just, get a quick balance and make sure it's clean and stop touching the knobs, make it transparent and, just let the musician play, and don't really mess with it, and which was very different because at the time, it was, SPX 90s and Lexicon PCM 42s, a lot of effects and reverbs were just hitting the market in the digital domain. So everyone was inclined, obviously, to play with the toys, right? And come up with new sounds and innovate things for live performance. But in that case, it didn't call for any of that nonsense. You didn't want to have it. So those were some great ways to learn, how to mix and how not to mix. It's kind of the way I think of it. But anyhow, so yeah, did that for a number of years. And I guess it was about 1985, maybe early 86, maybe. I was the front of house guy at the Cleveland Agora. And Sheila E. came through. She was doing a run of shows, a small tour. She had an album. Her father, whom I knew, Philip Esposito, since I played drums, I followed her dad. He was a fantastic percussionist for those drummers out there. And so this is his daughter, who was playing with Prince at the time, decided to bust out on her own. And so she had an album called The Glamorous Life that was pretty popular for the time in the mid 80s. And she too is a fantastic drummer and percussionist, although in this format, she was the lead singer. And so she was out front singing, and just, man, she was beautiful and could sing, and she'd carry a room like crazy. She would light it up. And then she'd do these timbali solos. And it was, you couldn't believe that, this hot chick, coming out, strutting her stuff. And then all of a sudden she starts playing timbales, and you realize, she had her stuff, And so it was, for most people, eye-opening, right?
Yeah,
she was
sounds like a whole package.
A pro timbali player. It was fantastic. And anyhow, so I was at the Agora, and Shoko, one of the large audio companies at the time, they sent out just a monitor package. And now it is a large monitor package, but just a single audio engineer, Bruce Schertz, and he came out of New York directly to this show in Cleveland. And so he got there, and he had a big old Harrison console and a million stage wedges, and he didn't have enough help. And so I was out at front of house taking care of the guy who's mixing front of house for Sheila, and I realized, hey, there's that guy. I've been in that position before. That kind of sucks, being the only guy up there having to wrestle monitors and set up a stage for not just the main act, but a couple warm-up acts. So I asked the guy who was Sheila's front of house guy, I was like, hey, do you mind, are you good? Because if you're good, I'm going to go help that poor bastard up there. He's struggling, and I've been there before. It's not fun, And so he's like, yeah, I'm good. So I went up on stage, and I didn't know Bruce at the time, but I'm like, hey, man, need a hand? And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. So I helped him, get stuff wired up and work it. And of course, he was grateful just to have anybody. And so at the end of the night, Bruce tells me, he says, hey, man, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., if you're on the bus, you're on the bus. And I wasn't sure what I heard there, because it was like 2 a.m. and we were pretty beat up. And I said, what did you say? And he said, yeah, if you're here at 8 a.m. on the bus, you're on the bus. Come on. And so I didn't know this. One of the guys from Shoko, one of the VPs, was there because I guess that if the Sheila E tour went well for them, they'd get the Prince tour as the follow-on. So they had sent out I forget who it was. One of the VPs at Shoko was there, and so he went to him and said, hey, man, I need help. There's this guy here. Can we, just get him? And he seems to be okay. And so, yeah, they let me on the bus, and I called the guys at Hood and said, hey, do you mind if I tag out? And Jack Bosnick was kind enough to say, yeah, man, go for it. And so I hopped on the bus the next morning, and
well, hang on. What did Grandma say about it? How'd you
yeah, right. Yeah. So my mom, I called them, of course, too. Said, hey, they were supportive. Yeah. They kind of got it, and I knew, that's kind of what I was working towards, kind of thing. And I had a lucky break, so to speak. And they were all supportive. And so that was cool.
That's
And
crazy.
then,
You just never know what's going to come out of literally anything. Like any
yeah,
sort of small
right.
action, you
Yeah.
just like if you put yourself in the place, you never know who's watching you or just
Well,
taking
yeah, I wasn't doing anything special, and it was just, I saw a guy struggling, and thought I'd help him out, and then to your point, so I do that tour. It goes for whatever it was, a couple months, and now I'm back in Cleveland and back at Hood Industries, and working. I forget if it was I guess still at the Agora, and I get a call. I had my car packed. We used to go camping up for the Clevelanders with Kelly's Island. So we used to go up to Kelly's Island, and
that's closer to my neck of the woods.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Out there at Marblehead. And so I had my car packed to go camping on a Friday, and I got home from work, and the phone rings, and this guy says, "Hi, this is Craig. I heard you helped out my brother. I'm putting together a project. Would you like to come help?" And so first of all, I'm like, my brother, who's the brother? So I don't know. It wasn't clicking for me. And he says, "You helped out my brother, Bruce," is what he said. And I said, "Bruce? Who the hell's Bruce?" And they, "Oh, Bruce Schertz. Oh, yeah." So then it starts to, and I'm like, he says, "Yeah, this is his older brother, Craig." And Bruce, I'm putting together this project. Bruce said you helped him out. Everything went pretty good. Would you be interested help coming to Texas and working at Shoko? And I said, "Well, hell yeah, of course I would." And he says, "Can you be here Monday?" I said, of course. I was like 19, I think, maybe 20, and I didn't have much money, honestly, and just getting by. And I was like, "Well, hell yeah, I'll be there. I'll figure out a way. So I'll see you Monday." So I hang up. And,
your car's packed.
My car's packed. I'm like, God, what am I going to do? I can't fly, and I can't afford that. I'm like, well, hell, maybe I'll just drive. So I go and get a map and get the layout, and I'm like, well, I'm packed to go camping. Maybe I'll go camping in Texas for a while. So I found a lake that was about 20 miles from Shoko, Lake Grapevine, and it's where we live now, in fact, decades later. And so I lived like a vagrant, and I took the car packed with camping gear, and I went to the lake, and I got there on Sunday, and my lifestyle became one of a bum, pretty much, where I would live at the lake for a couple weeks, and I'd go into the shop during the day, and we'd prep a tour, and then I would go out on a tour. And when the tour went in, a lot of times I'd fly back through Cleveland, say hi to the family, and then I'd return back to Texas and get my car out of a little storage that had camping gear in it, and head back to the lake and continue camping. And you can only camp out at a lake for 2 weeks at a time before they kick you out. Just note to self.
Noted.
Duly noted, right? They don't want bums like me living there. And
that's incredible.
So,
I didn't know any of that.
So I lived that way for about 2 years, actually, and where I just would, anytime I came back to Texas, I'd camp out. And eventually, one time I was doing a tour. It was most of the tours were rock shows, Genesis, and pop shows like George Michael, or even some older acts, the Beach Boys and Willie Nelson, and
those some pretty big acts.
All sorts of this company, Shoko. They were in part one of the companies that invented the whole method and the tools and the process of arena and stadium tours, and they were great at it. And they developed there's Shoko, who developed the Prism audio system and some large innovations in the large-scale audio sound reinforcement. And then they had, out of the same brain trust, created Very Light. And those are the lights that pan and tilt that you've seen a bunch and now have been recreated by other companies, but Very Light's still the one. They're kind of the gold standard, you might say. So they had some pretty innovative cats down there in Shoko and Very Light down in Texas. This is in the early mid '80s time frame. And anyhow, so I got lucky and ended up, thanks to Bruce, and just a little goodwill, I guess, referring me to his brother Craig. And of course, I didn't know Craig. He was a VP, and then he had mixed Genesis for more than a decade, I think, at that point. And so luckily, that was my first tour at Shoko, was working for Craig Shirts on a Genesis tour in '86. And that was a fantastic experience for sure. So wow, that's I guess how I got down here to Texas. And the joke in the family is, one time I did get kicked out of the lake because I was on a Orville and Dean ice skating tour, which was kind of an offbeat thing since most of the things we did were music concerts. This was kind of like an ice capade show. And so we did a leg or two of the tour, and I was on a break, so came back to Texas, and I was camping, and I think Christopher Dean hurt his hand or ankle or something, so they postponed the tour going back out by a week. So that put me into 3 weeks at the lake. And of course, I knew the guy, the ranger, and I said, "Hey, do you mind if I stay a week?" He said, "Sure." Well, then they postponed it another week. So I went back begging for mercy, saying, "Do you mind another week if I stay?" And by the time I hit a month, he told me to get the hell out, kicked me out. And so that's our joke here, kind of on the home front, is, I got kicked out, and then we came back to live here eventually and bought a house just kind of down the road from where I used to get kicked out.
That's full circle right there.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's
So that's
great.
life right there. Yeah, life.
I mean, that's finding a way to
lake.
do it, honestly. Like to be able to look back on those tours that you just named, those huge acts, I'm sure there wasn't anything like it. I mean, the 0.0001 people actually get to experience what being on the road is like in a new city every 2 days or something like that. Is there anything? What are the best things and worst things about being on the road, I guess, that's have stuck with you? And
wow, let's think about that. Yeah, there's a lot of both ends of the spectrum for sure. It's it's kind of like working on an oil rig, right? Where there's a pattern, at least for the large scale tours, where it's all premised on putting as many butts in seats as possible, right? So filling up stadiums or fields, particularly in Europe, a lot of the cities don't have, they don't have an AT&T stadium that can hold 100,000 people. They take a big field like in front of the Reichstag in Germany and turn it into a huge concert, outdoor venue for a week or two and that kind of thing. So because of that premise of just trying to optimize as many ticket sales as possible, there's a bit of a pattern where they have to do that, and it's based on the weather patterns, right? So you'll start off on one half of the U.S., let's say, and you might tour for 2 to 3 months. And then you go to Europe, and you're going to effectively tour one half of Europe if you were to cut it down the middle. And then you come back to the U.S. a couple months later. And of course, you have breaks in between the legs of the tour. And you might, then tour the opposite half of the U.S. And then you go back to Europe and eventually tour the opposite half of Europe. So you go back and forth a couple times when you're on these tours that go 12 to 18 months in duration. And, and then sprinkled in there is Asia and Australia, if some of them end up going down there for just sometimes a week or two at best. And so because of those patterns, it's kind of like working on an oil rig, right? And so you're out constantly for 2 or 3 months. So it's exciting, it's fun. We did some crazy things. We flew the Concorde and things of that nature that were kind of once in a lifetime experiences. And that varies, based on who the band is and, what they like doing. Like in the case for Phil Collins, he loved doing kind of extreme things, right? Just for fun. So I don't know if you recall, what was it? Live Aid, I think it was. Now, I wasn't part of this at all, but just as an example, he performed both Wembley Stadium and then I think it was JFK Stadium when they did Live Aid. So, Live Aid was a TV show as well as separate couple concerts that they held, one in Wembley and one, I think it was JFK. So Phil decided, hey, I want to perform at both venues. So, I think he started maybe at Wembley and did an early performance and then got on the Concorde and, 2 hours and 40 minutes later, he's at JFK and performing, later that evening at the second venue. So that was kind of cool, so people like that, where they want to have fun with it. And obviously you have to have the economic, deeper pockets to do stuff like that. It doesn't always make economic sense, but they would do things like that, So, hey, let's do an overnight show between New York to Paris. And so, we did a couple shows at JFK and loaded up, I think it was 12 semis full of equipment on a Cargolex jet. And it's like a 747. And that thing took off and it lumbered, over to France. Took almost 8 hours for it to get there. I think 7.5. And then we went and got about an hour of sleep and got on the Concorde and flew and beat the 747 to France, and then received the 747 when it got in and went straight to, I think it's Charles de Gaulle Arena and did a show there. So the equipment never stopped moving, it was in transit the whole time. But they would do some cool things like that really made it fun, right? But on the flip side of that, it's I'd say it's a young guy's game, right? It's not a great way to raise a family, right? It's, you're not at home, right? And that's certainly for me, why I didn't stay touring. I wanted to have a kid and have a nice home life kind of thing. So, and it's different for everyone, right? At different times in their life, what lifestyle is appropriate, right? And so, people pick and choose. And I still know guys that I toured with that are still out there touring like that. And for them, it works, and they love it. And I'm more on kind of banker's hours, in terms of working lifestyle. But I still have fun, but certainly, that lifestyle can really be pretty exciting. And there's something, I'll say this, that there's a certain sensibility that people have. And I think in part you develop it when you're in large crowds all the time. So some of the best producers or lighting guys, there's a guy, buddy of mine, Cosmo Wilson, who's one of the best lighting guys out there. And he was cutting his teeth, back in '86 with me, doing these tours. and he's still out there doing it. If you ever see Aerosmith's current lighting, he just does that. Judas Priest, and he stays on the heavier side of rock a lot of times. But his light designs are these beautiful asymmetrical things. And one of the things that Cosmo does really well is he can sense the energy of large crowds and control it. And it sounds kind of crazy, but a lot of people don't have this sensibility on how to ride this energy when you're in large venues with crowds, and how to control it and make it exciting. And I think guys that are out there, and gals as well, of course, the ones that are out there a lot, and part of it is learned, but I think it's also a sensibility that regardless of what you do, some people have it and some people don't. And Cosmo has it, man. And but that's just an interesting aside to me of folks that are out there doing it all the time, that they have this sixth sense about them that others don't, and so it's kind of a quirky outcome from it. But yeah, so there's a lot of good times. There's definitely a lot of rough times out there as well, with traveling and lack of sleep and all that kind of stuff, as you'd imagine. So
it giveth and it taketh.
Yes. Certainly, that's for sure.
Were there any cities in particular that you traveled to that, like, maybe you just either didn't have any expectations or, didn't really think it would be that awesome, that turned out to be really cool areas?
Wow. Let me think about that. I'll say one of the places that really impacted me was Scotland.
Okay.
And so that, I didn't have too much of a preconceived notion. And that there were a couple of us that hung out. One of the riggers, a guy named Ollie Sanders, he and I would go trompsing around on days off. And he knew all these great places over there. He was a professional mountain climber, still is, but
wow.
He'd go out and do the rigging on the tours, since he had such great balance and, could climb the high steel. And so Ollie knew some fantastic places. One's called the Isle of Arran, Aarran, I think. They're known for, I think there's a whiskey, Arran whiskey, and their sweaters. They have but this is a tiny island. It's kind of up towards Ireland, but it's still part of the Scotland. And that place, man, we went there and we climbed it's like a 3,000-foot little peak called Goats Fell Peak. And, it was a couple days off, and took a train to a boat and over to the island. And I just thought we were going on a day hike. And, man, it really changed what I thought the beautiful day is. Growing up in Cleveland, the beautiful day was drive to Florida and sit on a sunny beach, right?
It's great.
That was the quintessential beautiful day. But over there, man, the Isle of Arran, dark and moist and just flowers everywhere. And it's like a scene out of some epic, tale, that. So I'd say that one, kind of on the upside, really was a fine place that I'd love to go to again. I've been there. I did go a couple times later on some other tours, but I'll tell you, on the low side, just kind of jokingly, in Philadelphia, they used to have a venue called the Spectrum, and the Spectrum was their arena, right? And one of the jokes in the industry, is, hey, where should I meet you? And, one of the guys told me, hey, you're going to go to the building and drive around back, find where it stinks most, and that's where I'll be. Because these huge trash dumpsters are sitting out back right by the dock, you know. And so in the Philadelphia spectrum, you know, those days in the industry smelled so bad at their loading dock. It was the worst stench ever. And it was horrible. And so it became known as the rectum. Yeah, you know, yeah, we're going to Philly and we're going to play at the rectum, you know. And so sorry, Philly guys, you know, no offense, but yeah, it was a pretty stinky place. It's yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
So that for some reason sticks with me when I think of Philadelphia, unfortunately. But love their cheesesteaks. Not so much the Eagles, though.
I went there for the first time in November of last year, and I really loved the city. It was very walkable, and I got a good day. It was like 70 degrees, and I was like, I could see myself living here if I was going to go anywhere East Coast. But
yeah, Philly's awesome, man. Actually, it's a great place. Yeah, there's a little town called New Hope over towards the Jersey side. And that's I think that's just about 40 minutes outside of Philly. That's fantastic. Anyhow, but yeah, those are a couple locations. You know, I guess Scotland was the surprise, and so was Philly. Frankly, yeah, surprisingly smelly, but yeah.
So for my whole life, Uncle Dave, like I said, when you've come up here from Texas and vice versa and everything, you always bring an instrument with you. And you've already explained how you've played drums before, but I've seen you bring the mandolin up recently. I have seen your setup in your basement with your son Tyler, and you have just so many things going on. So how many instruments can you play, and like where does that lie, I guess, in your normal day routine? Like, how much are you actually playing instruments nowadays?
Yeah, right on. So we have a little, you know, room. My 19-year-old son, 20-year-old son now, Tyler, he's a guitarist, and
he will be on our show eventually.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, we need him on.
To do that, I'm sure. He's, you know, his current task at hand, he's taken a deep dive into pedal steel guitar. So we've been hearing a lot of that as of late. And yeah, so we got a little drum kit, you know, we got the Mando, we got, you know, a stash of guitars. Tyler's really gone deep into the guitar space, so a nice variety. You know, for me, you know, I'm still a hack, you know, when it comes to playing. You know, so you know, I have an old Hammond organ that I rebuilt, and a couple Leslies, and so we'll tap on that on occasion. And we had a little. My wife Michelle threw a surprise birthday party for me, or her and Tyler both, and we had a little jam here the other night with a couple of the local musician guys, the Zach
awesome.
King band, and Rocky Gribble, and a bunch of guys. It was just a jam, you know, and almost like garage band, old school kind of thing. And so that was a great little birthday party surprise. But yeah, you know, I'd say certainly for Tyler, you know, he's playing a lot more than I am on a daily basis. You know, he's hours a day into practice and playing. You know, I'm just hacking away, you know, on occasion each week, you know, whether it's, you know, Mando or organ or that kind of thing. But it's, you know, some weeks less, some weeks more, you know, kind of thing. So it's just hit or miss these days.
Is there a hidden vault of Dave Friedman music out there? Do you like to write?
You know, old Paul Nichols just sent me some that he's working on. There's some, you know, some old Hieronymus Bosch band I played in called Bosch. They had some good recordings, and we, you know, we'd tour Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and we played like places like CBGB's up in New York, and, you know, old janky bars, you know, up in the Northeast. And so Bosch has some music out there still floating around, and Carrying the Tornadoes and those types of bands that are, Paul keeps digging them up somehow. So
That's funny. Yeah, no, I would love. Yeah, I would love to hear it. And want to know what? We're gonna create a family song soon. We're getting Dylan involved. We're getting the whole crew involved, and we're gonna just put something together.
Oh, I love
There's ideas flowing.
That's right. Yeah, it's good fun, man. Writing music and playing music, man, doesn't get any better than that. That's for sure. And it doesn't matter, honestly. Some of the worst music we played was absolutely the funnest times. And to this day, of course, we had bands that, like, Bosch was a bit more technical and exacting, and it was really fun to play, but it was kind of a serious endeavor, And then there were these other things, like one time underneath the old Agora, they had a club called, was it the Mistake or the Underground or something goofy, typical basement to a larger club, right? And so that's where like Black Flag and all the, call it the undesirable music, all the offbeat stuff was in the basement, because they didn't want them upstairs in the nicer club, right? And so one time we put together a band called Uncle Wally, and there may have been large amounts of things that people took as part of this whole like festival scene that also enhanced the experience. But it was a throw together jam that was horrible, but it was a 2-hour nonstop song that was one of the funnest 2 hours you ever had in life, right? And it was just fun to have this free form kind of Frank Zappa-esque, thing. It was called Uncle Wally, right? And all the musicians that played it, Jim June and Dwayne Bohmeyer and a bunch of, Cleveland musicians that are fantastic guys. To this day, we still look back at that, and it was absolutely some of the worst music we ever played, but it was the funnest,
Uncle Wally.
Which is to say,
name.
You don't have to, play good music to have fun with it, right? And so anyhow, so don't wait,
No, it's the essence of creating. Like, it's just throwing spaghetti at the wall, and like, if it sticks with someone, whatever. But guess what? That pasta's for me.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, the whole damn thing.
Add a little sauce. That's it. And what's the thing about that? There's a place for that, right? So there's a place for the exacting, polished stuff, but there's also a place for the outrageous nonsense, right? And if you can balance that, of course, right, and find the right place and time, that's it's the variety that makes life good, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a record that JJ and I listened to. What would it have been? Probably March, April of last year, by an artist named Sonic Boom, and I would definitely fall into that category.
No, Uncle
Man,
Dave.
I haven't heard that name in forever. Sonic Boom.
Sonic Boom?
Oh yeah.
Wait, because
you're the first person that we know that knows Sonic Boom.
Dude, Uncle Dave, I bought this album. Like, I feel like we've talked about this so many times on this episode or like podcast, but like, it was at my local record store, and I had no idea it was a new album from 2020 of him then.
Yeah.
And it was called All Things Are Created Equal or something, and the album artwork was insane.
Hold on, let me find the poster.
Yeah, I bought it strictly on the album artwork. And
that recent 2020, huh? For some reason, I have a recollection of.
No, he's from the 80s. I'm pretty sure. Like,
yeah,
like he is.
That's my recollection goes way further back. Hey, Andy, say something so we can, so it switches over to that. I'd like to see that.
Sonic Boom checking in.
Oh, there it is.
Sonic Boom.
Yeah, right on. Oh, how cool.
And it was all
Love
those kind
this.
of it was all those kind of different things, but it was called experimental space rock was the category. And
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Uncle Dave, like it was just all random noises, like absolute chaos, where Klepp and I literally listened to the entire thing on the wrong speed on the vinyl because we didn't know. We were like, this still doesn't make sense.
What the hell it was.
It was one of the funniest moments
great.
because we listened to Physical Graffiti after, and as soon as it started spinning, Robert Plant's voice was like, we were like,
we were like,
great.
that's not how custard pie should sound. And then we realized,
Right.
oh wait, we listened to that whole other record on the wrong speed.
I cannot believe you know Sonic Boom.
That's funny. Oh my God. I'll tell you another great band, that it's not, it's at the avant for sure, the avant-garde, but maybe not in a different way. But one time when I was at the front of house guy down there at Peabody's, I think it was before it was Peabody's Down Under. It was called Peabody's. It had a different name. I forget.
Peabody's in the shallows.
I think it was before Dewey bought it, and it had a different Peabody. So anyhow, so the Residents came through, and I didn't know who they were. Are you hip to the Residents?
I've definitely seen the name. I've definitely feel like I've listened to some of their songs.
So their icon is even if you haven't heard the music, you may have seen their logo icon. It's a guy dressed in a tux. His face is a single eyeball, and he has a top hat. That's kind of their thing.
Okay.
But they are fantastic. And when they came through Peabody's, they're part avant-garde performance music. They had this guitarist on tour with them called Snakefinger, who played with a cabo and was just this great wacky guitarist, kind of a la Alan Holdsworth on acid kind of thing with a cabo. But they were also a theater troupe. So they would do these gags. And one of my favorite gags that they did, so you're in a small club, the stage is only maybe 12 foot tall. And they had two people dressed in ninja suits, and each person in the ninja suit, total head covered and everything, they would run around the stage and do things throughout the show. And so one of the gags was the ninja guys, I think one was a girl even, remember old-fashioned trouble lights? They're the yellow lights with the hook that you hang on your car hood when you're working on your car engine, right?
Yep.
So they had one of those in each hand. And so they would have them turned off, and they would run around the stage, and they would do these fantastic little things that they figured out, in advance, since they were into theater, how to do things. And this one was great. So you'd have the band playing, the lights are up, and all of a sudden Snakefinger would go into some wacky cabo guitar solo. And as he's doing that, all the lights in the place go dark, and the ninja dudes have crawled up right in front of him, and they have the lights 8 inches from his fingers, and they turn on the lights at different points in time. So now you see these little up close, very bright, lights on the neck of his guitar and his left hand and his right hand. And they're just turning them on and off, right? Just randomly. And you're like, what the hell's going on? And then what they do is they turn the lights off and they tumble backwards, like stop, drop, and roll. And they're laying on the ground now in front of Snakefinger playing guitar. And they turn on the lights. And suddenly, you're no longer paying attention to Snakefinger, who's fully lit, but instead you're looking at his shadow that's going up the back wall and up over you. So the perspective from an audience member is he's playing over you. Like his head,
That's
like
crazy.
the shadow was probably 20 foot, 10 foot up and 10 foot over your head. And in a small club like Peabody's, it was like he was playing down over you, like a giant shadow. And so now they would do these gags that were so fun.
That's
and,
great. Wow.
But kind of like
Snake finger.
Sonic Boom, doing trippy stuff. These guys the residents did some of this nonsense, but in a live performance, theatrical, the Ninja guys. And but they're still out there, man. Yeah, if you ever have a chance to see the residents, we're
going to dive into
fun,
them.
They're great, man. Yeah.
That's on Club in my agenda tomorrow's Residents album. All right, Club.
All right.
Do they still have places like where they, have those kinds of shows up in Cleveland?
Yeah, I mean, they have, it's like tiers now. Like some of the most popular, like local places are Mayhall's or Mahalls, Winchester. The Grog Shop is still kicking. Beecham Ballroom and Tavern.
I see.
And then
The
like
Agora.
Yeah, and then I was gonna say like the next level up is probably like Agora, House of Blues, and then
Nautica,
and then Nautica
for outdoor.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
But yeah, no, but nothing like that. I mean, I would hear stories about Peabody's all the time, and I never really had a chance to be like old enough to like go to those kind of rally shows.
Are they doing any avant-garde or any like offbeat things at any of these, like the Winchester or like places like that? Do they take a chance and do this weird nonsense?
They definitely do. I mean, there's like more like
good.
Happy Dog, Crowbar is another one that's come out and about, and like, I mean, you get everything.
Cool.
You mentioned earlier how there was like Cleveland was on the come up in like the 80s and with all different kinds of music. And I mean, the people I've talked to, at least like the post-pandemic, there's just so many new different bands, and like everyone's really just trying to like push each other. I mean, we're featuring so many just not known bands, I guess, to the common public at our event that's happening February 24th. And I'm just really excited, honestly, like not just for the event and for raising money for charity, but like to just show people like, look how fucking cool this is. And this is at your back door. Like show up to these things here. Because you don't have to go and pay the hundreds of dollars to see your favorite artist when these people are creating music that is like just as good, and pay $10 and just get your mind blown. And then you can be
love it. Hey, tell me about that. Who's playing there? Like what types of bands do you have playing at it?
Yeah, so our main headliners, well, so 4 out of 6 bands that we got have like 7 or more people with horns and the whole shebang.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so on the main stage, so there'll be 2 different stages. On the ballroom stage, which is the main one, headlining is Colin Miller and the Brother Nature, and then it's Rubik's Groove, and then Apostle Jones. And again, they are all different big bands with horns, range from soul, funk, jazz. I don't know, Club, you got it anymore?
Jam, like Rubik's Groove. They're kind of like a funk jam band. Apostle Jones is more like
rock
soul. Yeah, but with a rock element to it for sure. And then they're the 3 other bands, the Ice Cream Militia, Mezcalado, Wigged Out. They're like maybe not quite as established as those other 3, but they still have a lot of the same elements. Like Mezcalado's like very like psychedelic indie rock.
Cool.
Ice Cream Militia is more just like this weird funk rock that can be like heavy at times and like very jammy at times. And then Wigged Out is like, I guess they would be the one that is like a little different than the others. They're more of like a punk rock, high energy, but they're also very good. But also Spruce,
as a percentage, how much is all original versus cover?
Oh, 100% original. They all write their own music.
Yeah, love it. Love that. Yeah. Fantastic.
What were you saying, Club?
So just going back to the avant-garde in Cleveland, you got to tell Dave about the piano guy at the open mics.
Oh yeah.
That is the definition of avant-garde.
Yeah, it is. No, there's two scenarios that I've been to. So there's this guy named Dr. Thomas who plays at every single Winchester open mic, which is every Tuesday. And he films every single act. I don't know where the video goes. And like every single act he films, and I like with a great camera. But he just goes up there and like I don't know if it's like, I don't know. Basically, he's just clicking just random. Like it's like if you put like a 5-year-old at a piano and was just like clicking.
Okay.
And I mean, he means well, and like he's great to the community. Everyone like loves him. But like, I think this is the style of music you're talking about. Another one I just saw at the Crowbar at an open mic where someone had like a Korg, and another person was playing a Nintendo DS that was making like alien noises. And
I remember that video.
I'm gonna send you the video, Uncle Dave, and just to give you a little
great.
taste of this kind of music. I mean, again, to each its own, like its type of music. I
Right.
support anyone to go up there and do that, but yeah, that is maybe up the alley you're kind of talking about, where anything goes.
Someone who does that gag, but does it in a fairly musical sense, is a guy named George Herzl, and he's a local Cleveland guy. And if you ever get a chance to go see George Herzl, he's great. So George is he played. I met him. He played in a band called The Effect back in the day with Jim Gress and Todd. I forget Todd's last name. Todd Allen. And they were great. And so they played all the usual haunts down in the flats back in the day. But since then, George has like a solo thing he does. George was like one of the first guys in Cleveland to get a synclavier, which at the time was like, buying a house. It was, this incredibly expensive digital keyboard when they first came out, and a Lindrum, and he's always been into these heavy electronics and digital stuff, way before most people were into it. And so these days he does this gag, which is great. So you can catch him at these local pubs. If he's not doing larger events, he does these, one-man show kind of things. And he brings in all these keyboards and nonsense, and he's on par, anyhow. So one of the things he does is he has the old operation game, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so he has one of those hooked up somehow to his system, and he uses that sound effect during, Mr. Roboto or, whatever the song is that he's doing. And he plays the operation game within the context, but it's melodic. That's the difference. It's just not complete noise, And but it's funny, man. He does some fantastic digital gags. And he's just a local guy, up in Cleveland. But he plays down in Florida a lot. But if you ever get a chance to see him, that's. But I got to tell you, what was that? The Ice Cream Mafia, or what was the name of that
Ice Cream
band?
Militia.
Toledo's own.
Militia. I love this, man. What a great name of a band, Ice Cream Militia. That's
and they're
great.
a militia. How they have like 11 people or something?
I think 10. But yeah,
awesome.
the funny thing about them, I don't know if this is just a social media thing or something they created, but like if you go to one of their shows, you get creamed. That's like what it's called. You get creamed. You went to the Ice Cream Militia and you get creamed.
Dude, I
get creamed.
You cream it. Yeah, no, they're gonna bring a party there, a fun time, and I think they call their horn section the Scoops or something. Or like,
no, it's the Push Pops.
The Push Pops. That's what it is.
Of course. What else would you call them, right?
Yeah, well, so I think what that actually is, I think the Push Pops used to be a separate band because the Ice Cream Militia in their early days did not have a horn section, and they would play UT parties and they would just rock out. And yeah, their first album doesn't have any horns at all. And so I think what happened is they both were just playing at the same venue a lot and just jam together, and then we're like, all right, we're just gonna make one big band. I
Oh, is
believe
that
that's
cool?
how it happened.
And I'll tell you, Uncle Dave, the names of their albums are Chocolate Covered Nonsense, and the most recent one is called Moose Tracks.
I love this. You know, I was Tyler. I got a call from a guy. His name's Phil Holly, and he's kind of a young up and comer singer. Has almost a Buddy Holly shtick about him. Kind of. He's a really good singer, anyhow. So he calls up Tyler and says, "Hey, I need a lead guitarist. Would you be interested?" So Tyler and I drive over to Fort Worth last weekend to the Twilight Lounge, and he's the warm up act for this other band, and so Tyler's going to check him out to see if he wants to play with him, and which he does. So that ought to be a good collaboration. But
that's awesome.
Along the way, we stay and we watch the point. And they're a band out of Austin. And man, these guys were killer. And they were like this very typical three-piece. The drummer, man, this older cat that just, his wrists were so loose and played kind of a jazz style, but the style of music they're playing was kind of it was a crazy mashup of I don't know, like an indie at time almost shoegazing, but poppier, and had like this upbeat vibe going to it. And the guitarist is just fantastic. And anyhow, so a three-piece band. So it's drums and guitar, and the keyboardist plays bass with his left hand in a Hammond organ keyboard sound on the right. And for these three guys, and their whole vibe was really like musically, they were doing stuff that was very simple and then very technical at other points. But it was just the vibe that they had going was this really kind of cool indie kind of thing going on. It was fantastic. Anyhow, so if you have a chance, check out, I think it was The Point or The Part. I think The Point out of Austin. And man, they were
Hell yeah.
They were great.
Love new music.
That was a cool find. Yeah, me too, man. You love hearing new things and new takes on stuff, and that's the fun part. Is, innovation.
I'll show you. Club and I put together actually a playlist of all the bands that are going to be playing our event on Spotify, so I could shoot that over to you.
Oh, cool!
Just click shuffle, and you'll find out what's happening.
That's fantastic.
It is.
Too fun, man.
It is, but Uncle Dave, we can't let you off the hook. There's always one question that we ask every single guest, and and it's one you may. So you've gone into so many different memories and so many details of your just life in music and just sound audio in general. But what is your most memorable concert experience? And that can be one you've attended, one as a fan, memorable in a sense of making you happy, or memorable in a sense of what the fuck did I just witness? And
right.
I sure you, and you've explained you've seen so many shows over the years, but is there just one? And you could say a couple as well, but just any moments that really, really stick out.
Concert experience. I'll tell you, as a young kid, one of the most impressionable concert experiences that I ever had was they used to have a series of concerts down at Edgewater Park in Cleveland. And they were called the Edgewater Park Summer Festival or whatever it was, and they did a series of these things over the years. And I recall it was in part, you had the guys from WMMS were there, and they of course promoted it. But the whole gag that I remember most was you'd have this field of people outdoors, the lakes behind them, right? And so it's an outdoor scaffold stage, and really it wasn't that big. There might have been, I don't know, 3,000 to 6,000 people, maybe. I don't think, they were significantly large. And the most memorable thing was Murray Saul would come out, and he would do the gotta get down gag that he did. I don't know, do you guys ever do a Google or YouTube search on Murray Saul? And Murray became kind of a local hero to like the working man, because what he would do is they'd have him on WMMS every Friday, and they would play I think Friday on My Mind was like the song every Friday at 5 p.m. And they'd play that song, and then Murray Saul would come on and he would rant for like 4 or 5 minutes about how the man's beating me down and it's Friday and don't take that from the man. You worked all week, and the guy was just hilarious. He was kind of part drunk sailor, but also poet, and he would tie together these phrases with this great eloquence that were like very Zappa-esque, smart ass, don't take it from the man, and be independent and be a thinker, and, don't, make sure to recycle your trash, and, whatever the theme of the day was, and and he would end the whole shebang with this outrageous, you got to get down. And he would, the outro was gotta, you gotta, and he'd string that on for like a minute. You gotta get down, damn it. And that was the tag, right? And then they'd play a Springsteen tune, and that was the same gag every Friday, right? So you would hear that for years, growing up. And so at these concerts, then the Edgewater concerts, that's how they'd start the show. Murray would come out and get the whole place riled up, and he would do the same shtick, and there was weed wafting through the air, and they'd have these great bands too, all the old rock bands that would play it. So anyhow, that was awesome. A pretty memorable shared experience of Clevelanders growing up throughout the late 70s and early 80s kind of time frame. And get a chance, go on YouTube. His stuff is out there. People have captured it or whatever, and it's some pretty humorous rants is what he did. And so I'd say that. And then really, the other thing too, another Cleveland tie-in was, the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium, that held about 80,000 people. And they had the, what was it called? The summer series, it was a play on words from baseball. What'd they call it? The summer series of rock, I think, is something like that, or series of rock. That's what they called it. It was the series of rock, and each year they would have these series of concerts, and they were fantastic. They'd have 5 bands on the bill, and the whole stadium would be sold out. So you'd have 80,000 people, and it would be a show like Uriah Heep and Ted Nugent and Led Zeppelin. Wow. And Queen and all the bands of the time, right? And the Who, and wow. So they'd have these huge shows, and it was just a complete mosh pit down on the field. So what we would do is we found that, I don't know if you remember, in the old stadium, there was home plate, and then behind home plate you had the net, going up to what were the boxes that hung from the bottom of the second level, right? And those were the announcers and that sit up in those boxes, right? Mm-hmm. So during the concerts, all those things were empty, right? And so we found that we could go up some stairs and climb some metal and walk across the I-beams and sit on top of those boxes.
Oh my God.
Such that our feet hung out over. And if we happened to fall, we'd fall down on the net. They left the baseball net up, right? So we would pack all sorts of things, and you'd spend all day sitting on top of the boxes and watch the whole thing unfold in front of you. And there's some great write-ups of the World Series of Rock. That's what they called it. And those were some fantastic shows and just so impressionable. And of course, a lot of things went wrong with crowd management and all that. And, many of those things got fixed as a result, for the better, I'm sure. But I think there's, some Facebook group that it has our Cleveland legacy or something like that has a bunch of old photos of those shows out there. But yeah, the World Series of Rock is what they called it. And those went on for years. And those were some of the best summertime experiences you could ever have when it came to music. And wow, what a shared communal thing too, like the community of people. And really you would think it would be mayhem, which it was. But what was interesting, unlike today, everyone was really cool. So even though you had, all this mass of people, in today's world, for some reason, I don't know, people in a lot of ways aren't as kind, right? But back then they had more of that hippie, look out for your brother kind of attitude. It was my sense of it. Maybe it was just an age thing.
No. People today have the BE, Uncle Dave.
Yeah.
Or sorry, the BDE. They have that big dick energy and just think they can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, this was a very cool, kind of Woodstock scene. Hey man, kind of help, or have an apple, or things, that kind of nonsense. And so it's a very cool, safe environment in that sense. And so yeah, anyhow, so I got a couple memories there that were pretty impressionable growing up.
Yes. No, those were great. I appreciate you. And again, we both appreciate you just coming on. I love your stories over the years. So I'm glad we were able to get you on an episode. And I learned so much more myself. And I'm sure everyone else did out there, a part of our Stampede. So we thank you very much.
Stampede. I love it.
Yes.
Well, I love what you guys are doing, certainly. And, having this kind of shared forum, that obviously there's kind of just part of the stupid storytelling, but, this kind of forum leads, my experience has been that these kinds of discussions, man, it's really a cool way to learn stuff that you otherwise wouldn't have insight. Not that this is some, it's obviously not an intellectual endeavor, it's just fun, but hopefully, you hear something or it makes you think of something that you otherwise, wouldn't. And so I dig what you guys are doing, man. And so keep it up, man. Can't believe you've done, what is it, 76, did you say?
Yeah, this is episode 76.
Wow, that's crazy.
Now we've been grinding, but honestly, it's been very just rewarding on our end as well because of what you just described. Like you can only read so much, and but to be able to actually hear it from someone who's been in the business, actually went and done it, and just like yourself, who was an incredible guest. Like we've had so many more from different aspects of music that really don't get highlighted, and that is
that's cool.
And yeah, that's like our main focus is really just putting highlights to that, because the final product, people, is not everything that's going into it. There's many other steps that are in place. So yeah, no, again, we appreciate you very much.
You bet. Thanks for for doing it, and pleasure to be on. That's for sure.
Hell yeah.
Hanging with you guys.
I'm sure we'll have you back.
Yeah.
Again, Dave Friedman, everybody. Woo! All right, but besides that, my name is Spruce.
I'm Clep.
And this has been another episode of Vinyl Stallion.